from your experiences, why aren't people voting?
So I'll kick us off to make sure we have time to put into my beautiful colleague. I'm always enamored by. If we all had one good answer for this, we wouldn't be in the position that we're in. But there are numerous issues. And you kind of started off alluding to one of them about the fact that folk may be illiterate, folk don't necessarily understand what's on the ballot. There may be folk that turn around because they don't feel comfortable and don't get it, and they will never come back as a direct result. You're talking about different generations of people that they had different experiences in terms of the ballot. You're talking about proximity. You're talking about a multitude of things, varying issues that keep people away. But if I can sum this up about how do we turn out the vote, civic engagement is the way. And I think that's why Coffee has spent this last almost 2 hours talking about civic engagement versus voter registration and the synergy and where's the alliance with them all. And so the idea here is these four young women that maybe, I don't know if we can see them based off a radio show, that we can see, they're already civically engaged. You don't see many teens on a hot summer day spending their time in the office listening to this. Because whether they're playing with their phones or not, they still hear it. It's like I used to say about my son when he was in my stomach and I was in law school. He still had to hear it, whether he wanted to or not. And so that message transforms people as they go along because it's educational. Civic engagement is a multitude of things that looks different ways. It can be institutional organizing, you can be a community organizer, you can be an educator, you can be an advocate, you can be a volunteer passing out cookies. But the responsibility is yours to show up and figure out what's important to you and where you want to be in that line, and how you get people to turn out ultimately over the years is making sure that people understand it's embedded in them. It's so important to them that they are a part of something, that they get to have an impact on something bigger, and when they figure out their role in it over the years, that they understand it's in them, so that they're going to do it no matter what. I don't care what I got going on. I'm still showing up to vote. I always have a plan. And I also, it has to make me feel like I have some level of power and influence and control. And I think over the years, what you see from people, they don't feel powerful. No matter what they do, when you register them, you say get out to go vote for this person, we're going to have a black president. And then they didn't see the impact of those things because back to what you asked before when my beautiful colleague and co-founder talked, right? They don't even understand his limitation in power. Exactly. And when you try to explain to them the executive branch of government is limited by these things and Congress consistently check them because you had a Congress that don't back them. And then you have our wonderful new political commentators, as I like to say, don't know what the heck they're talking about. And then they want to come on and talk about, but Trump was able to do it, not understanding that the reason why President Trump was able to do half the things he did is because he had a Congress that decided not to check him because they had a vested interest in what he was doing. Yes. But make no mistake, now you see him running, and all of a sudden you see a party not backing him because they now made a decision to check his behavior. That's a very limited position of power. There's no branch of government that has limitless and endless power and possibility. But the biggest game is Congress. Make no mistake. So at a state level, when we talk about these challenges and having a democracy, and the fact that a democracy in itself is a newer concept. The United States is new in a sense. We're only 200 something years old. And so having a democracy is new. And we're showing other countries, it's bigger than that for all those who say they're patriotic, they love their country, that a democracy doesn't work. Because you have made a decision to take away the power of the majority of the people. That's a democracy. And so now they're trying to redefine what a majority means. And so helping people understand like what that means to them, that you can't just sit back because you get the benefit of everything that only one generation back fought for. My dad was in high school when MLK came to speak to them. Like it wasn't that far away. And you listen to people say that because it's things that people already fought for before you. But that make America great again should start to boost people up because you're watching it in the last week be rolled back. So what you didn't have to do because somebody took 3 steps before you, you might have to experience and get out there. And so that level of engagement has to be there again for people to understand there's power in this, there's power in organizing. You just have to be willing to show up, and you have to be willing to show up for somebody more than yourself. And that takes years, and it takes commitment, and it takes leadership that's not a love with glory for themselves, like everything.
And that's why I asked Al to break down that and talk a little bit about that facts and information, because connecting with the right organizations, which is why I asked Erica and Crystal to come on the show, is making sure you connect with the right organizations. We have the right purpose for creating an organization, have clearly defined mission, goal and objective. Erica, do you want to answer Al's question?
Yeah, co-sign on everything that Crystal just said. We essentially share a brain. So, I mean, it's multi-layered, and our time today won't allow us to get into all the nuances, but maybe make 2 or 3 points. First being that everything is by design. I think understanding that and maybe accepting that, which is not an easy thing to accept, that policies and processes have been put in place to, to target specific members of our community, and those members of community tend to be the people that are people of color, right? And this is not a new phenomenon. This did not just start in the last couple of years. So we know that, right? So we have to understand that because it's by design, we have to figure out what are the ways that we can either intervene or undesign these processes. I think secondly is understanding some of the foundational things that have changed and shifted in our landscape. As we talk about our young leaders here that are present in the studio, we know that things like civics are no longer mandated, right? My husband is an educator, history, poli-sci, social studies is his licensure, and he and many of his amazing colleagues elect to bring these type of conversations into their curriculum, but they are not required to do so. So it's unfair that some students, have the benefit of having a teacher that may go above and beyond and bring this, integrate this into the curriculum, but not every student receives that. The third point is that, we undermine people's intelligence way too often, right? So for far too long, residents, specifically the city of Cleveland, have been left to feel like a transaction.
Yes.
And they know that. They know that there are certain individuals that will come to their communities at certain times of the year asking for their vote, and those individuals will not be there day after the election, 2 days after the election, or maybe even 3 or 6 months after the election, right? So in order to build relationships, we have to understand that it's not a transactional action, that we're really trying to make a transformational change as it relates to who we're in relationship and making sure that they have the tools. That's ultimately why Cleveland Votes exists, to make sure that nonprofits and organizations in our communities have the tools, because it is so complicated, so convoluted. Al, you talked a moment ago about even reading ballot language. I do this work every single day. I live and breathe policy, and I've been a lobbyist, all the things. I feel like I'm a relatively intelligent person, and I find myself reading the ballot language, questioning which way I want to vote, or having my husband peer.
What's a lobbyist?
Pardon?
What's a lobbyist? What does a lobbyist do?
Sure, and thank you for asking for definition. So at the time, I worked for a local nonprofit that focused on community and economic development. So essentially, I would serve as one, not the only, but as a member of that organization that would educate and engage legislators on specific issues. So whether we were going to Columbus to talk to our state reps or state senators, either advocating for a specific bill and or talking to them about the issues that were facing the housing and community development sector here in Cleveland. We did that here locally, the city and the county, as well as in Washington, D.C. So, I don't say that as like a bragging right, but just to say, like, I do consider myself a relatively intelligent individual. My mom is here in the studio. Her and my dad invested a lot of money in me to get to where I am today. But that doesn't make me immune from, also feeling some of the impacts of the way the system is designed, right? So making sure that I surround myself with those that have some maybe nuanced subject matter expertise. And I think that's the other thing that Cleveland Votes has tried to do over the last 9 years, is really cultivate both a multi-issue and a multicultural coalition of partners, because again, no one person, no one organization can meet the needs of every single person in the community. Before we talked about literacy and how that is a major challenge, and I've literally witnessed it when I have either registered voters or attempted to register a voter, and it's a very sensitive topic, right? Because you never want to embarrass someone, and so we try to be really sensitive, and if we could tell or observe that someone maybe is struggling, say, hey, my handwriting is pretty good, would you like me to do that for you? But what I'm always left feeling is that if I can't take them past this stage, the registration stage,
Right.
What level of confidence can I have that they are going to feel prepared to cast their ballot on their own, right? So that's a real issue. Before we talked about translation for those that are non-English speakers, and we do have a pretty robust non-English speaker community here in Cleveland, whether we're talking about our Latinx friends, Arabic speaking, we have a pretty high percentage of folks that Arabic is their first language, and so making sure that we're translating this information, having local nonprofits like Smart Development, the Arab Voter Project, Young Latino Network, OPAL. I mean, there's just so many amazing groups, and again, we can't be at every single or in every single nook and cranny in the city, so it's really important that we have that long, ongoing relationship, and I think that comes back to the initial question that Al posed to us. It can't be a transaction.